Alright everyone, this particular story is really something because it's something I didn't really expect, which is Dianne Feinstein. You'll know her as the extremely elderly and arguably demented Californian senator. The one that famously, well, at least in my mind, years and years ago, when Obama was president, I think, somewhere back then, back in the old days, the bad old days, well, we're back in them now, so, the days, claimed that bloggers and vloggers and stuff shouldn't be protected by the First Amendment because they weren't part of the press. And she's got, like, weird beliefs with regards to, she's an extreme anti-gunner. She doesn't really believe in the right to privacy. She's a severe authoritarian and very far left. She's a Californian. The funny part is that over this and other issues, further leftists, like the cringe fringe fanatics, actually consider her to be right-wing. So you can be for massively higher taxes, extreme amounts of regulation, complete gun control, and the trashing of the Fourth and First Amendments, but somehow you're marginally conservative. Well, maybe in the sense of George W. or something like that, otherwise you can leave it. But even Dianne Feinstein, fucking Feinstein herself, is coming out now and saying she wouldn't vote to end the filibuster. This means that this goes well beyond the leftists want progress and Manchin and a few other right-wing Democrats are standing in the way. If you think that Dianne Feinstein is right-wing, you're off in the loony bin left. To be clear, you probably consider Bernie Sanders to be like a centrist, and you probably consider like Antifa to be a right-wing group at that point. That's nonsense. Any realistic view of politics, any realistic view of what we could loosely consider the general terms we use for left and right would put Feinstein in the left. The considerable left, not the furthest left. It's not Bernie Sanders, but she's out there, and on certain issues certainly aligns with them. This means that the filibuster, there is 0% chance that it will end. Because the problem is that the Democratic Party now would have to negotiate with at least 3 and possibly more people. Joe Manchin, who represents West Virginia. He represents a red area, the state that is very conservative. A large number of people who voted for him are probably Republicans. None of them want the Democratic Party to eliminate the Senate's stopgap against direct democracy in order to allow San Francisco and New York City to essentially run the nation. They don't want that. Kyrsten Sinema, she represents Arizona. It's a swing state. While there are certainly more people that would be on the left that voted for her, and because, of course, she's a lesbian, she has some of that progressive sway as well, I can't imagine that the average Arizona constituent is gung-ho for massive gun control, gung-ho for massive stimulus aimed at urban areas, and also gung-ho for massive regulations, especially on the energy industry. Dianne Feinstein is on the left. Not the new... She's on the far left as it would have been defined 15 years ago. She would have been considered on the fringe back then. The problem is the Democrats have been dragged way off to the left field by people like AOC. Bernie Sanders helped to start this, actually, through 2 completely failed presidential campaigns, but he got a fringe element of the party whipped up, and also the Democrats absorbed a bunch of younger, further left voters that otherwise they probably wouldn't have voted Dem. They probably would have been too busy throwing rocks at police. So they made them all of these promises. Now they can't fulfill them because of these 3 people. The problem is all 3 of them would want different things. What Joe Manchin would want is a kickback or pork barrel or something in order to get him to even consider voting, and he's already ruled this out, so it won't happen, to end the filibuster. It will be completely different from what Feinstein would want to see in an infrastructure deal, in a stimulus deal, in a whatever deal. Completely different. Joe Manchin is opposed to virtually all gun control. Dianne Feinstein thinks that you shouldn't be able to own a BB gun without being 21 and sending a DNA sample. How are these reconcilable? They're not. And this is the problem of the Democratic Party. The Democrats, unfortunately, became too good at doing what they've done in the past. What they've done in the past. They tell the far left, look, those Republicans are so far right, oh my God, vote the lesser of 2 evils, otherwise the greater evil wins. And so leftists would reluctantly vote for them, and they'd make promises, but then they never really expected them to be fulfilled. The problem is that the Democrats allowed Bernie Sanders to run, which meant that it signaled to the leftists, hey, we're getting somewhere now. They're finally taking socialism seriously. See, this is a bellwether for the movement of the United States. People are waking up to the evils of capitalism, and now we're going to become a communist nation. Well, that's not what was happening. They threw him in as a joke. They threw him in there to get you to vote Democrat, and except it honk with the top level of the election, it completely fell through, by the way, just to be clear. You lost more than half of your House majority, you failed to take the Senate, you lost the New Hampshire State House, you lost local races across the board. The Democrats lost the last election, with the exception of the one position that they fortified by billions of dollars in direct influence over state election policy. With regards to everything else, the Democrats fell flat. Why? Because Americans said, hey, you got this dude who came in second place, arguably, who was praising Castro. You've got people saying, hey, we'll do this, that, and the other thing, and it'll all be free. But then people wised up, they sobered up a little bit and said, hey, that's going to cost a lot of money. And it's not going to come from Bezos. It's not going to come from the donor class, because they're the ones that control the Democratic Party. It's going to come from the middle class, you idiot. That's what the leftists don't understand. When you've got a party in which Dianne Feinstein is considered too moderate, she's holding back progress, we need to have it devolve to a direct democracy because reasons, you're nuts. And the Democrats really, what they're doing is they're harming America by doing this, because they're setting up a situation where you're going to create an opposite dipole where the furthest right will actually gain power. I warned about this, by the way, about half a decade ago. I said, thank goodness, the populist side, the MAGA side, was rising up because they weren't far right. The idea of an America First platform is really no different than Reaganism. Donald Trump is basically Ronald Reagan 2.0 with a very few other facets. Number one, actually caring about the border situation. Number two, actually slashing regulations as opposed to freezing them. He was more Reagan than Reagan. By the way, one of the best modern presidents that we've had, Donald Trump, which is why he was so maligned, because the globalists want to take us into a completely dark direction with BlackRock and world regulations and world flat taxes and all of these other crazy things that will make them a lot of money and make you essentially a permanent rental class serf. This is what globalist neoliberals want. This is what leftists seem to want. They want something worse. They want literal gulags. Russia, by the way, bringing those back now, but they're not going to be called gulags. They'll be called work camps. But I mean, this is nuts. That's what rose up on the right, actual populism. The problem is that when the neoliberals fortify the election, screw the populists, and embrace the far left, they're going to create an actual far right dipole. That is, the MAGA people, the populists, which really just want normal reforms, things that would have been considered no-brainers in 1995 or something like that, that even the Democrats by and large wouldn't have had a problem with, are called extreme, all of a sudden they see milquetoast. Oh, they're fence riders. You know, yesterday's rebels and extremists and the far right, no, they're actually centrists or even lean left. So we need a new solution to the problem, and then an actual further right will rise up. This is how nations end up in civil war. To be clear, this is exactly what happened in Weimar Germany. The Nazis and the communists didn't suddenly escalate and rise up because the centrists were doing something right. No, the exact same situation happened. The centrists, that is the social democrats, the Republicans, and so forth, they got together and they started spying on, suppressing, and propagandizing against as well at first, both the National Socialists and the Communists. Both of these dipoles, which at first were weak, they're powerless essentially. And in the time of economic problems, like what we have now, we have stagflation, we have joblessness, we have a million different issues. We have the social concept that the nation's being sold out to the world, which is exactly the same. And by the way, both the communists and the goddamn Nazis preached the same ideology when it came to this global imperialism. They both said the same exact goddamn thing, they just proposed different solutions. The Nazis said, look, the centrists aren't stopping the commies. Look at how violent and evil they are. Join us. So they grew up. Then because there were more Nazis around, the communists looked at the centrists and said, look, they looked at the center left people. Look, they're rising up and the center won't do anything. They're old and powerless. Join the Communist Party. And so very soon you end up with a situation where between these two groups, you've got a majority of the population has joined what only a few years prior would have been seen as extreme and wrong and awful and insane. Well, how did that possibly happen? And corporations were involved too. Censorship was involved too. It's the same situation now. Do I think the U.S. will go full Weimar and split apart or we'll have World War III or something. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that the social alienation factor is there. Well, we've had it before in U.S. history, to be clear, without civil wars. We had this in the early 1900s. There were anarchists and there were counter-revolutionary groups throwing bombs and killing people, more so than today. But it wasn't a fun time, and it prefaced the Great Depression. Why do we want to go through that again? People who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. This is why critical race theory needs to be stomped into the fucking ground. Because we're not learning from history. We're basically going back to a neo-Confederate ideology when we use critical race theory. Then you have this shit, Feinstein, of all people, defending the Republic by putting the kibosh to the furthest left, that essentially thinks that the United States government should be an autocratic system in which bills are rubber stamped from the House to the Senate to the presidency as long as the same party controls them. That's a great way, by the way, in the inevitable midterm loss of the Democrats of both the House and the Senate, in my opinion, to hand total power to the Republicans. Well, as a non-Republican and a non-conservative, I'm not sure that I want that because I think the next president will be a Republican. Yeah, I want the Republicans to actually have the potential power to overturn Roe v. Wade. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I want the Republicans to have the actual power to increase foreign aid to certain countries. Probably take it away from others. It's okay. And double the military budget. Yeah, why not? They'll go into Bush inflation too. Bush was a money printer. Bush loved debt. Started several wars on credit. $3 trillion total. Yeah, why not? Why not invade Iran? Yeah, that sounds like a great time. See, one-party rule is not a great idea. We've already got de facto one ideology rule. You know, the neocons and neolibs only vaguely disagree on a few meaningless issues. Mainly identity politics issues. On most things, they agree. So congrats. I guess she's gotten old, and so she's like, fuck it. I don't have to play the partisan game. I'm not going to be in the Senate next time around anyway. Doesn't matter if they kick me out. What is she, like 84 years old or something? And she's got dementia. Open rumors that she has Alzheimer's. All she's got to do is hold on till 2022. She'll have helped save the Republic. Dianne Feinstein, of all people. The left is so terrible, they've got me congratulating fucking Dianne Feinstein and Kirsten Sinema. It's nuts. That's about all. Peace out.